Hello, it's Psychocore. We present Erotic Dissociation and the Fragmented Self, a Jungian analysis of intimacy and identity. In the silent chambers of the human psyche, intimacy does not begin with another, it begins with the self. Yet for many, closeness is not a comfort but a mirror that fractures. The moment another person draws near, they do not awaken affection but awaken ghosts. This is the paradox of erotic dissociation. The closer we move toward intimacy, the more dislocated from ourselves we become. Erotic dissociation is not simply a defense mechanism. It is a silent implosion of identity that occurs when desire and shame coexist in unbearable proximity. The body remains, but the self recedes. In clinical terms, dissociation often emerges as a coping strategy against trauma. But when this process is eroticized, it transforms into something even more enigmatic, a theater in which the self plays dead so the body may act. Jung wrote of the shadow, the repressed, the denied, the disowned. But in the realm of intimacy, what is repressed is not merely darkness, but vulnerability itself. The erotic encounter, rather than being a fusion, becomes a site of disappearance. The dissociative subject does not give themselves to the other. They vanish before they can be touched. This phenomenon is disturbingly common in those with fragmented selves, survivors of early emotional neglect, individuals with borderline tendencies, or those shaped by chaotic attachment styles. When they are desired, they disappear. When they are loved, they escape into abstraction. Their bodies become masks. Their touch becomes a simulation. It is not that they do not want love. It is that they cannot bear the gaze that accompanies it. The erotic then becomes a paradox, a longing for union paired with a terror of being seen. And so begins the cycle, craving connection, fearing annihilation. In many therapeutic sessions, clients will describe a sense of becoming numb during moments of intimacy. Their voice flattens, their gaze drifts, and they speak of sex as something that just happens to them. This is not merely discomfort, it is a shift in consciousness, a subtle withdrawal into a dissociative void. At first glance, this may resemble avoidance or disinterest, but upon deeper exploration, it reveals a profound ontological crisis. The dissociative erotic subject is not fleeing pleasure. They are fleeing the unbearable confrontation with selfhood that intimacy demands. To be touched is to be known, and for many, being known is inseparable from being destroyed. Freud once remarked that the erotic is always entangled with the death drive. Nowhere is this more apparent than in the person who dissociates at the height of vulnerability. In their world, to surrender is to dissolve. The psyche in self-defense unplugs. The body remains in motion, but the mind floats above, observing, detached, ghost-like. There is also a performative element here. The dissociative individual often becomes skilled at mimicking connection. They learn the language of desire, the gestures of intimacy, the choreography of closeness, all without ever arriving at the moment of presence. It is the simulacrum of bonding, a choreography of absence. Jungian thought offers a deeper lens. The erotic dissociative is often possessed by an archetypal figure, a ghost lover, an internalized tyrant, or a shame-bound anima or animus. These inner figures hijack the moment of closeness, whispering narratives of unworthiness, fear, and fragmentation. The self is no longer autonomous. It is overtaken. And so, in the moment of erotic contact, the dissociative subject is not there. They are exiled, not by the other, but by their own internal mythology. To understand this dynamic, one must trace its roots. Dissociative eroticism often stems from early environments in which touch was conditional. Intimacy was weaponized, or the body was a battleground. In these environments, the child learns a dangerous equation. Closeness equals control. Desire equals danger. Later in life, these equations persist encoded in the body. The result is what we might call somatic mistrust. Even in the arms of a loving partner, the body clenches. The nervous system misreads safety as threat. And so the erotic act, which ought to be a return to the self, becomes an escape from it. But what of the partners? Often they are left bewildered, sensing something missing. They touch, but they do not reach. They love, but they do not find. The dissociative subject is a lover in absentia. They may smile, respond, even initiate, but their presence is spectral. This does not mean intimacy is impossible, but it requires a radical form of inner work, not only for the dissociative subject, but also for the one who loves them. True intimacy demands that we remain in ourselves while we approach another. For the dissociative mind, this is the ultimate terror. Nietzsche, and Thus spoke Zarathustra, wrote, "One must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star." The dissociative erotic subject is full of such chaos, but the star is buried deep beneath layers of silence and fear. Therapeutically, the path to healing begins with slowing down. Erotic dissociation cannot be fixed through reassurance or physical affection alone. It must be named, witnessed, and held in the slow container of presence. The goal is not performance, it is re-embodiment. Somatic therapies, trauma-informed touch work, and depth analysis can all be helpful, but only when grounded in safety. The dissociative subject must first learn that their body is not a threat. Only then can they begin to inhabit it during closeness. There is also a mythic dimension to healing. Jungian work encourages us to explore the archetypes that inhabit our erotic lives. Who enters the bedroom with us? What inner ghosts or gods demand tribute before we can feel safe? Often healing comes not through confrontation, but through dialogue, listening to the parts of us that vanish when love arrives. For many, this process is painful. It requires grieving the years spent pretending intimacy, the relationship sabotaged by absence, the loneliness behind the mask of seduction. But it is only through this grief that true intimacy becomes possible, to touch another without leaving ourselves. That is the work. To remain inside our skin even as it is touched. That is the miracle. There is also a social and cultural layer to this phenomenon. Modern society commodifies intimacy, reduces sex to spectacle, and teaches performance over presence. In this landscape, dissociation is not an anomaly, it is adaptive. Social media, pornographic culture, and hyper-individualism all contribute to a climate where connection is shallow and selfhood is curated. The dissociative subject does not emerge in a vacuum. They are responding to a world where being fully seen is rarely safe. Moreover, for those in marginalized bodies, due to gender, race, or sexual identity, dissociation becomes not just a psychological response, but a political one. It is a refusal to be consumed by the gaze, a silent rebellion against the historical violence of being turned into an object. And yet, even in this rebellion, there is loss. The erotic becomes sterile, connection becomes symbolic, and the self remains adrift. The challenge, then, is not merely to understand erotic dissociation, but to transform the world that necessitates it, to build cultures of intimacy rooted in consent, slowness, and truth. Only then can the dissociative subject begin to trust again, not just others, but their own body. One of the cruelest ironies of erotic dissociation is that it often affects those who most crave connection. Their hearts are vast, their minds deep, their longing intense. But the very act of being seen triggers an inner collapse. And so they live on the edge, desperate to be touched, terrified to be held. In such individuals, intimacy is like standing at the edge of a cliff. They want to leap into the arms of another, but every instinct screams to retreat. Their nervous system is not wired for safety. It is wired for survival. This is why love alone is not enough. Love must be wise. It must be trauma-informed. It must be patient enough to wait at the edge of that cliff, not pushing, not demanding, but simply staying. In time, the dissociative mind can learn that it will not be shattered by closeness. But this learning is not cognitive. It is embodied. It comes slowly through hundreds of small moments of safety. A gaze that holds without invading, a touch that asks instead of assumes. And when these moments accumulate, something miraculous happens. The self begins to return, not all at once, not triumphantly, but gently, like dawn after a long night. What then becomes of the erotic in a healed self? It becomes sacred again. Not performance, not simulation, not ghost play, but presence. The body becomes a site of return, not escape. The gaze is no longer a threat, but a bridge. In Jungian terms, we might say the shadow has been integrated. The ghost in the bed has been named, and in naming, disarmed. The shame has been brought into the light, and what remains is not perfection, but wholeness. The erotic becomes what it was always meant to be. Not a hiding place, but a meeting place. A dialogue between selves who dare to remain whole in each other's presence. To arrive at this place requires courage. Not the courage to perform, but the courage to stay. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe our channel, like, and share the video. But what of the collective unconscious? That vast reservoir of archetypes and mythologies that Jung believed to reside beneath individual awareness. Erotic dissociation, too, is shaped by these deeper cultural shadows. The wounded feminine and the devouring masculine. The absent mother and the punitive father. The seductress and the martyr. These archetypes linger not only in myth, but in our bedsheets, in our silences, in the reflexive way we flinch when touched. Every act of intimacy is haunted by echoes. For the dissociative subject, these echoes are louder than the present. They speak louder than a partner's voice. They frame the entire scene in ancestral scripts of abandonment, punishment, or objectification. The body is no longer a site of freedom. It becomes a battleground for archetypal possession. This is why genuine healing must be mythopoetic. It is not enough to explain the dissociation cognitively. One must reimagine the entire story. The dissociative erotic subject must not only learn to stay, they must learn to re-author their internal narrative. They must go from ghost to protagonist, from the one who disappears to the one who dares to be seen. This journey is inherently spiritual. It is not about perfect functionality. It is about re-inhabiting one's humanity with compassion. There will still be moments of retreat. There will still be flashes of numbness or disconnection. But slowly, with patience, the body becomes less a place to escape and more a place to return. It is not simply about learning to have sex. It is about learning to be alive in one's skin. To breathe, to tremble, to speak, to stay. This is erotic resurrection, not the performance of desire, but the reanimation of the self. Let us consider a therapeutic example. A patient, a woman in her mid-30s, describes dissociating every time her partner kisses her neck. Not during conflict, not during violence, but during tenderness. As she puts it, I vanish the moment he gets close enough to love me. In therapy, they explore. The body tenses, the breath stops, the mind goes blank. And slowly, beneath these reactions, a memory surfaces. A moment in childhood when affection was confused with domination. When being touched meant being controlled. When love meant powerlessness. This discovery is not an intellectual victory. It is a somatic unraveling. Her muscles shake. She cries without knowing why. But something loosens. Not just the trauma, but the identity built around it. This is what dissociation does. It fragments not only the moment, but the self. The erotic self becomes split. A watcher, an actor, and a ghost. And healing is not about merging these parts into a singular self, but about allowing them to speak. About giving space for the ghost to say, I left because I had to. I return because I choose to. Each body tells its story through tremors and tightness, through retreat and resistance. But each body also longs to speak again, to reconnect, to no longer flee its own skin. This is why erotic dissociation is not merely a diagnosis, it is a language, and learning to speak it is an act of rebellion against everything that taught us to be absent. In the broader context of society, we might ask, how do we raise a generation that no longer learns absence? That no longer associates eroticism with abandonment or pleasure with peril? We begin by teaching presence, by modeling it in our relationships, our friendships, our touch. We begin by dismantling the myths that frame desire as conquest and intimacy as danger. We begin by listening, not just to words, but to silences. We must teach that eroticism is not inherently performative, that bodies are not stage props, that the most erotic thing we can offer is not perfection but presence. To be with another in full, without flinching, without leaving, that is the act of true intimacy. In a world addicted to simulation, presence becomes sacred. In a culture of hypersexuality and emotional shallowness, the ability to stay becomes radical. The dissociative subject is not broken. They are exquisitely sensitive to a world that often betrays tenderness, and so they must become warriors of slowness, poets of stillness, architects of their own return. Erotic dissociation is the scar of a psyche that once found safety only in vanishing. But every scar is also a doorway, a place where something tried to close but never did. These doorways are not sites of shame, they are sites of rebirth. To step through them, one must gather allies. A therapist who knows the terrain, a partner who listens not only with ears but with presence, and above all, a self willing to come home again and again even after the body forgets. This journey is not linear. There will be setbacks, numb days, regression, panic. And that is okay. Healing is not perfection, it is commitment. It is the quiet courage to say, today I will try again. In the end, erotic dissociation teaches us something profound. That intimacy is not the opposite of fear. It is the place where fear and love meet. And when we dare to remain, even with trembling hands and vanishing breath, we reclaim the right to feel, to desire, to be touched, and to stay whole. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe our channel, like, and share the video.